You all remember Donald Rumsfeld, right? Remember he was Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush. Very much the first person, I think, for a lot of people who comes to mind with the Iraq War of 2003 and a whole range of other things from the War on Terror. And he had a bunch of prominent roles in the White House before that. I mean, the guy had been in government for a long time in different capacities. But that very famous little moment where he was discussing known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. I am concerned right now in the financial sector and about things that would affect all of us when it comes to the unknown unknowns. I'm just going to put a few things out there, right? Because as I always tell you, nobody can predict the future, but we can at least look at the odds and look at what's going on. Right now, SVB Bank, all the depositors, Silicon Valley Bank, and the people that were banking there, thinking that they were just putting money in a bank and not some version of a very low yield hedge fund or mutual fund or something. They have been backstopped by this program with the government, the Fed, the FDIC, the financial alchemy of it's not a bailout, but it actually is a bailout. Because if it wasn't a bailout, the bank would have gone under. So it is a bailout. But it seems like people have calmed down a bit. And as I said, the regional banks have recovered. But there are some issues right now that are also out there. First of all, inflation. What are the newest numbers? It slows to 6% from 6.4% a month ago. So the Fed is now considering pausing its interest rate hikes because of the banking crisis. But you see, this all just takes us back to the basic problem. What did I say yesterday? This all comes from a decision to crush the bond market, destroy anyone's ability really to get a pretty standard yield for savings accounts, treasury bonds, you name it, bonds from companies, bonds in general. You couldn't get any income on the money that you had saved, whether you're an individual or an institution, unless you took riskier pathways. And the government decided alongside this whole process that they were going to keep printing money through quantitative easing, through QE. So interest rates were kept artificially low. You can't get money from your savings account, and they keep on pushing more money into the system. This has caused inflation. How do you deal with the inflation? Well, how do you bring it down? You have to let interest rates normalize. The problem with letting interest rates normalize, they say, too quickly, is that there will be economic pain associated with that. We started to see a little bit of that with the bank failures that have just occurred, the run on SVB, the banks that were on the brink, it seemed. And now we're told, oh, don't worry, it'll all be fine. But the fundamental problem remains. What is the Fed going to do now? What does this mean for inflation, for the cost of everything that you need to feed yourself, your family, pay your rent, gas up your car, buy the things you need, whether it's health care or a dozen eggs, buy the things you need day in and day out. What does it mean for you? And the answer is they don't really know. And this is where I get into the unknown unknowns and also the plans that may start to get a little bit more attention out there. But first, let me put this, before we get into the possible plans, let's look at some things that are happening. So Credit Suisse has had its shares, a huge bank, has had its shares fall to an all-time low. It is the seventh largest investment bank in the world, and it has said it has material weakness. So that's not a good sign, right? Now, maybe that's just because of a few specific things for Credit Suisse. Okay, fine, but people will point out that there have been problems there for a while. Archegos, I believe it was called, the $5.5 billion loss they took because of this Archegos fiasco there. Don't have to get too deep into the weeds on it. Point being, there are issues. That's a really big bank. That's a really big problem. You've also got the staff of Facebook finding out today. The tech sector has already been in a big decline. Staff of Facebook finding out that 10,000 jobs are about to get cut. 13% of all Facebook staff, and Mark Zuckerberg, like the AI robot he is made real, is telling everybody to get ready for a, quote, new economic reality that will continue for many years, as in they are doing efficiency. I actually read the letter they put out, not a particularly warm and fuzzy one, about the efficiency cuts they'll be making at Facebook. This is happening all over the place. Big tech companies that seemed like they were money printing machines, and at the time they were just a few years ago, are laying off large numbers of people. A lot of the tech stocks that were really drivers of the economy and were propping up the stock market overall, it's where most of the gains were coming from, they've gotten whacked pretty badly in the last year. It depends on which one you're looking at, but things are rough right now. If you also look at car loan defaults, another indicator, not quite housing defaults, but car loan defaults, they are right now way up. They're the highest they have been in a number of decades, I think, at this point. So this is higher than it's been in quite some time. And that's obviously really disconcerting as well. So what are they going to do about all of this? Now, I brought up the unknown unknowns because look at how quickly SVB turned into a financial crisis that required the entire attention of the White House, the Fed, the Treasury. And what was it, a month ago? Jim Cramer was on TV, buy SVB, whatever, sure. I think there's actually, there are people that they trade based upon the opposite. They actually manage money based on the opposite of what Jim Cramer recommends on his TV show. It's pretty funny. I think there's an index that someone's created where you go in the opposite direction. But here you have a series of major challenges to the economy, and you have also a few things that have happened in rapid succession that no one seemed to see coming. And right now it feels like, oh, maybe things are getting a bit better. But those unknown unknowns, they linger out there. What would it take for us to really go off the cliff here financially? Systemic weakness in a major bank somewhere? Well, Credit Suisse just said they have that, but maybe that's not enough. Maybe they'll figure that out. How many of these massive financial institutions have made a similar bet to what SVB did, or have taken other risky ventures onto their balance sheets that could really create enormous problems down the line? So many of the people you'll see on TV are economists and people in the financial sector who don't actually manage money. And they've been wrong many, many times in the past. But because they have a long and established history of being wrong, it seems they continue to go on TV and tell you what's going to happen. They have no idea. I will tell you, they have no idea what's going on. You know who looks really prescient right now would be Ron Paul and the people that have said the Fed, which was really created to avoid, isn't it supposed to avoid the very situation we are in right now? Right. All this inflation, all this money printing, and then trying to control the recession. Look, nobody wants there to be pain, but what goes up must come down. I mean, there are some fundamental realities here that a government structure is not really able to manage. Right? We can't actually have people who decide that we're just never going to have if we could create a situation where we never have a painful economic downturn, well, of course we would want that, but that's not reality. That's not the way this is going to shake out. And then that brings me to something else that I wanted to spend a little more time on today, because I know people are concerned about it. And I think in the post-COVID world of easy authoritarianism that we fell into in this country, the notion of a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, is something we all have to take very seriously, because here's how you may be thinking about the situation right now of the economy. You might be thinking, so the Fed is screwing things up once again. They're not a bunch of geniuses. They're not, the wizard behind the curtain making everything run and look great. They're actually creating a lot of these dislocations and a lot of these distortions in the market by Fed policy. And now they're telling us, well, they're going to fix it. But they're riding the tiger or riding the dragon on this one. They're not really determining how this thing goes. They're just doing their best to make it less bad than it would otherwise be. You would be thinking, well, we have to figure out a way to lessen the power of some of these institutions going forward, right? But you have to remember, for government, failure never is met with, we shouldn't do this next time. It's, we need more power and more resources. So how do you get that? You might be thinking, well, we need to look more at, the whole range of things, right? And go and listen to all the old Ron Paul lectures. He's still giving lectures, but go and listen to the things that he said about what the Fed, the boom bust cycles and all the rest of it, what it does. And people are talking about cryptocurrencies now and all the rest, ways of getting outside of this centralized government control. But that's if you think the answer here is less central government control. The people in charge, you know what they think the answer is? More government control, more ability to determine exactly what you can do with the money that you have. And that brings us to a central bank digital currency, which is something that I do want to speak to you about a little bit, because it's already happening in places. There are different kinds of CBDCs out there, but major economies, like China, India, they already have this. And as you know, China's gotten rid of cryptocurrencies. So centralization, top-down centralization of money through a digital currency is happening elsewhere in the world. And there are arguments underway right now about how to do this in America. They've been happening for a while. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is off the front pages of the Wall Street Journal. It's just a question of how deep into this we go and what we actually do with it. It's going to happen at some level.
I don't care what bank we're talking about anymore. You as a depositor have no risk whatsoever. So what stops the idiot bank manager going forward from doing anything they want within the regulatory environment, taking as much risk as possible to get the stock price of that bank up? That's how they're compensated. This is going to create some very perverse acts by bank managers and crazy behaviors. And in the end, it's not a long-term solution whatsoever, because either you decide to nationalize the banks, in which case all of bank managers work for taxpayers as employees, just like giant utilities, or you let the private sector be the private sector. And within that, you have collapses by idiot managers like the Silicon Valley Bank, which, by the way, at the end of the day would have only cost depositors around 5%. Those that were uninsured above $250,000. And frankly, the people that have money more than $250,000 are the sophisticated investors. They can take the hit. We shouldn't have done this, and now we have the moral jeopardy ahead of us of idiot bank managers everywhere doing crazy behavior.
Does anybody in the Biden administration, at the Fed, Treasury Department, you name it, do any of them have an answer to Mr. Wonderful's question there? Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. People are saying that this has effectively de facto nationalized banks, as in the expectation that people have is that the FDIC. Now, people can tell me, oh, but that's not. No. This is the expectation, clearly, that the $250,000 limit for, maybe it's per person and so two people, but, generally we talk of the $250K limit. Or per account, right? So you could have multiple accounts in a bank. But whatever the limit is, it isn't the limit. Because whatever you deposit into a bank, the federal government now just guarantees. That is the expectation that has been created. Well, given that expectation, and given that we have artificially low interest rates, right? And so that means that banks who have been lending out money in the past, up until now, haven't been able to charge. The rates have been lower all across the board, right? They haven't been able to get the money on the money they lend based on a real market value. What's to stop them from deciding, okay, let's just lever up and do crazy stuff and make as much money as we can? Because if the bank depositors, everybody, Sally, Sue, Bob, Sarah, Mike, and everyone else, all the bank folks that are putting money into accounts, there are hostages effectively. Well, you can't let us fail. We're the bank. What about all our depositors? We're using their money. Folks, this is a big problem. Okay, this is not so, and they have no answers to this yet. And we haven't even gotten into central bank digital currency, which we will dive into next.
The problem with bailouts, right, is that suppose that you're a bank right now and you're not really doing so good. You took some bad bets, the bets are down. Well, if your guys are going to be bailed out, if your depositors are going to be bailed out no matter what you do, then you should swing for the fences, right? You should take the biggest risks that you can to try to, double down and get yourself out of trouble. And so what usually happens when regulators come in and try to, outsmart the market and provide backstops is that risk goes up and eventually something really horrible happens.
Eventually something really horrible happens in the economy. Right? You bail them out, and then finally a collapse happens, a crisis that isn't just a 48-hour or 72-hour thing. It's a people losing their homes, their jobs, their life savings, their retirements kind of thing. So this is what we're talking about when we're looking at the stakes of this. And also it reminds me of Charlie Munger is Warren Buffett's right-hand man. Many people would argue Warren Buffett is the most legendary investor of all time. Charlie Munger is right alongside him and is a source of a lot of wisdom. And he says, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. What is the incentive right now? What is the incentive for banks? Is it to change their behavior dramatically so that they are being more responsible stewards of the funds that are put in bank accounts with them? Or is it to just know that push comes to shove, you make a lot of noise, you say, if you don't prop us up, all the banks go down simultaneously, or there'll be a run on all the banks and they'll all collapse. And so the bailout is built in for them. This is a very important question for us to, as a society, honestly, as a country, as a nation, to grapple with. Because on the one hand, it does seem really unfair to people who are putting money in accounts that they just think they're putting the money in a bank. It's FDIC insured. And people say, well, they should be backstopped to the 250 or whatever it is that but that's not really what we expect, is it? People who say that, I would ask them, okay, so if you have your life savings, you have $500,000 in the bank and someone turned to you and said, sorry, your bank failed. We'll get you that 200. You're backstopped the 250. A lot of people would say that's not fair. They'd say that's not fair. Even ones who were saying that they wanted SVB Bank to fail. So this is where there's the tension. There's another huge point of tension, though, with central bank digital currency. And I thought it was worth it because we're going to be talking about this. Clay's having a great time right now in Italy. When he comes back, we're going to certainly be focusing in on a lot of what is happening with this economy, because I think we're just seeing the early stages. The first artillery rounds from the enemy have landed in our proximity. There's a whole lot more coming for this economy. Okay, this is not about to just go, oh, it's all fine, despite Elizabeth Warren. Oh, I'm so glad Biden's in charge. No, we don't really believe that. But let's talk about. We don't believe it. She might. Central bank digital currency. Here's what you need to know. You've got over 100 countries that are already exploring it officially in some capacity. A lot of places. And those countries are representative of over 95% of global GDP. And this is according to the Atlantic Council Central Bank Digital Currency Tracker. As I mentioned, China, India are already using a digital currency. Sweden and Japan are thinking about a rollout of a digital currency. By the way, this is all being done and talked about before this most recent bank failure. So it's not like, oh, now all of a sudden people are thinking about central bank digital currency. This has been going on. This has been a longstanding effort. And Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, has said that the U.S. central bank is not yet going to create one without direction from Congress. Okay, so let's just keep this very clear as we're talking about it. They're open to it. The U.S. government, or at least the Fed chair, I should say, is putting out there, maybe. Now, here's what is so important to separate out. There is the possibility of CBDC that would just be for the banks from the Fed to the banks. And it would use blockchain and the technology, really the technology that has been adopted by crypto like Bitcoin, blockchain technology, to have a central ledger where they can efficiently, easily, and with total trackability move money to your bank, to Bank of America, to Chase, to regional banks, SunTrust Bank, Santander, whatever, right? They can move the money to different banks for lending purposes. That's not, that may just be actually more efficient. And I know a lot of people who I would say I'm politically aligned with who don't see that as a big issue. That is not from the Fed to the banks themselves, and to effectively make that a more streamlined and more efficient system. That doesn't strike me as Big Brother, oh my gosh, we're heading into dystopia. But then there's the creation of individual accounts with a central bank digital currency, whereby the Fed effectively is going to deposit money into your account, or that you will set up there will be individual accounts that the government will put money into, this digital currency, and it will be 100% trackable. The government will have a direct pipeline, if you will, not through a bank and through any other levers and levels, but this will be directly to you, to your computer screen, your account, which means that they have total control of it too. They can put the money in, they can take the money out. They know what you're spending that money on. The government would have full transparency and full view with this method of central bank digital currency. Why do you think the Chinese like this? The Chinese Communist Party likes this so much. So with a central bank digital currency and its adoption in this model, how hard do you think it would be for a Democrat administration to come along and say, you're not allowed to, we're going to say you're not allowed to buy any more guns with this. We're going to use some executive authority. So this money can't go toward gun purchases. They would want to do that. I mean, they're already trying to debank. This is happening all over the country. Banks are getting pressured by the federal government, Biden administration, and also their own woke executives to debank people that have anything to do with the firearms industry. Yeah, what you're doing is totally legal and lawful and fine and even constitutionally protected. We're no longer willing to hold your deposits or engage in any transactions with you because you're affiliated with the firearms industry. That's happening. It's happened to friends of mine, happened to people I know. So that's one component of this. But also with COVID, what we saw is they would have the ability to tell you, well, this money can only go for the following things. Oh, sorry, we're in an emergency. Or you know what, actually, we're going to create a special tax for carbon purposes. We want carbon neutrality, so you can spend money on the following technologies or with the following companies, but not these. The government would have the ability to do all of that. It would have effectively total control, the ability to track every transaction that you would make, no matter how small. They would know exactly what it is, who it's going to, and the ability to perhaps block it in real time. To say, no, you can't actually donate or give that money or spend that money there. This is, people are going to argue, well, it's great because, you won't be able to use this money to break the law with. Yeah, but Democrats want to do a whole lot more than just stop illegal transactions from happening. They want to use this as a tool of social engineering. We all know that. I think that's obvious. I would find it laughable if anyone tried to argue otherwise. Everything that they have shown us, and COVID was perhaps the biggest window into this, everything the Democrats have shown us is that when they have the ability, because of a crisis in particular, like a banking crisis that maybe is just beginning right now, they push through policies that increase their power and decrease and diminish your liberties and your freedom. And a central bank digital currency would be an enormously useful tool to those ends. So it would be effectively creating the basis for a social credit score system. What are you spending your money on? How much does the government approve of it? It would be the basis. I know this sounds like Brave New World stuff. This sounds dystopian, futuristic nightmare that's supposed to be so efficient with the experts in charge. And that's because it would be. It would be these things. There are a lot of ways you could see that this would be used for social engineering and for absolute control. Universal basic income, by the way. Think about how easy that would be. Set up your account. And the government gets to just put the money in the account, but it also gets to tell you how you spend the money. Figures out what you're spending all the money on all the time. You think the IRS is scary now, by the way? Wait till you get a central bank digital currency. So it hasn't happened yet, but you're going to see more and more people calling for it, I think, especially if a crisis happens and it feels like the banking system, fractional banking, has been rocked. You're going to hear very loud calls for this. Look at how quickly they went to shut up, peasant, stay in your house, mask up outside, and get shots number 7, 8, and 9, or else you're a bad person. You don't think those same people, that same apparatus, would say, okay, you now have to use the money the way we tell you to use it, and you can only use the money that we're putting into your account directly, and we see where every penny goes. Oh no, they don't want that much power, right? Sure. You know they do.